CEO invites invisible employee to the ball and discovers much more than expected. The red carpet for the innovation ball was laid out, with guests in tuxedos and dresses sparkling under the nightlights. Outside, the San Francisco event center gleamed, but inside, amidst the circles of tech industry leaders, people were trying to be something they weren't. Brighter, more confident, more influential. Leon Hastings, CEO of Quantum Shift, was among them, watching the night unfold with the cool demeanor of a man who always had control. But he wasn't just there. For his traditional gala appearance, there was something else at play, something he didn't yet realize, but was about to discover. During a casual conversation with other tech moguls, a bet emerged, the kind that always pops up at business dinners. The idea was simple. Take a common employee to the event, someone who is invisible to the company, but who can stand out among the stars. Whoever can make their person shine wins. Leon chuckled at the proposal. Always someone trying to make the predictable unpredictable in the world of business. But something in his mind lit up. Why not? He thought. He already had someone in mind, though he didn't know what it would truly mean to choose her. Isabella Carter was one of those employees who slipped under the radar at the company. Her work at Quantum Shift was impeccable, her mind brilliant, but she was one of those people who refused to shine. Her thick-rimmed glasses, reserved posture, and tendency to stay out of the spotlight made her an essential player no one really knew. She wasn't there to impress anyone. She was there to work Leon, a man who knew how to recognize talent but also knew how to pull the unexpected out of a situation. Thought she'd be the key. He didn't know why, but something intrigued him. It wasn't about winning. The bet was about discovering something he had never noticed before. The next day, as Isabella sat in her cubicle, immersed in lines of code for the company's newest project, Leon walked in, quietly closing the door behind him. He watched her for a moment before speaking. "Isabella, I need a favor," he said, as if preparing the ground for something difficult to explain. "You're going to the Innovation Bowl with me tonight." Isabella lifted her eyes, surprised, but not overly shocked. She thought something was off. The CEO asking her to an event with high society? Something was strange. "With all due respect, Mr. Hastings, I'm not exactly the type of person who..." She hesitated, unsure how to finish the sentence. She didn't see herself there, in that world full of rehearsed smiles and excessive networking, but Leon interrupted with an intriguing smile. "Don't get me wrong. It's not because I think you'll shine like the others. It's precisely because you don't try to be the center of attention. I want you to come for yourself, Isabella, and just be you." There was something almost challenging in the way he spoke, but there was also a tone of genuine curiosity, and in that moment, something in Isabella shifted. It wasn't about pleasing the boss. It was about doing something she'd never do. Perhaps it was an opportunity to see herself in a different way, without needing to change who she was. "I know I'm not your obvious choice, Mr. Hastings, but I'll go," said Isabella, with a firmness in her voice that even surprised herself. The night of the Innovation Ball had finally arrived. Isabella spent the afternoon preparing, nervous and unsure of what to expect. She was used to hiding behind her computer screens, diving into code and solving complex problems, but the idea of being observed, of being seen, terrified her. She didn't want to be the center of attention. That wasn't her comfort zone. The pressure of being chosen by Leon Hastings, CEO of Quantum Shift, to represent the company at such a prestigious event weighed heavily on her shoulders. It was just a bet, she thought, yet that didn't help calm her nerves as she prepared. Looking at the dress she had chosen, simple yet elegant, with a deep blue tone that brought out her eyes, she questioned her decision. Why am I doing this? She wasn't going to the ball to impress Leon, but rather to test herself, to see what would happen when she stopped being invisible. And maybe, just maybe, she was curious to see how things would unfold between her and the CEO. When she arrived at the event, the first thing that hit her was the sheer magnitude of the place. The ballroom was filled with tech industry moguls, entertainment figures, and business leaders. Everything was immaculate. And there she was, among those dazzling figures, in a simple dress, feeling like a fish out of water. Isabella took a deep breath and walked in, trying not to show her nervousness. Leon was there, surrounded by other influential people. But as soon as his eyes landed on her across the room, he stopped. Isabella was in the middle of a group, but unlike everyone around her, she wasn't trying to be someone she wasn't. She wasn't striving to impress anyone. Her presence spoke for itself. It wasn't about how she looked, but the quiet confidence she now radiated. She didn't feel comfortable among all those unfamiliar faces, but something had shifted in her. She was there for herself, and that look from Leon, not of judgment, but of genuine interest, made her feel, for the first time, valued in a way she had never expected. "Are you all right?" Leon approached her, not hurriedly, with a gentler expression than usual. There was something about her that had caught his attention, but he couldn't quite figure out what. Yeah, I'm just not used to places like this," Isabella replied, trying to avoid making eye contact. She had never felt comfortable in a place full of superficiality and networking competitions. But next to Leon, she began to feel a little more at ease. "I understand," He smiled, noticing the vulnerability she was trying to hide. But the only thing that matters here is how you feel. If you're here, it's because you're special. It doesn't matter if you're in a gala dress or a simple pair of jeans. Those words struck Isabella deeply. She had always been someone who hid behind her work, someone who didn't like to draw attention. But the fact that Leon, someone she had always seen as untouchable, saw more in her than just an employee, was changing her perception of herself. As the night went on, Isabella began to loosen up. She wasn't trying to impress anyone, not even Leon, but as she realized that acceptance of who she was came from within, something inside her clicked. She interacted with the other guests, listened, shared ideas, and, somehow, she began to shine, not in the way she had imagined, but in a more authentic way. Leon watched it all with more attention now. It wasn't just a casual observation anymore. There was something about Isabella that made him question all his ideas of leadership, of who deserved to be seen, and of what truly made someone shine. She wasn't there to show off, but she was, standing out in a way no other guest had managed to do. I didn't expect this, Leon thought to himself as he watched her. He approached her again, finally getting closer to talk. You know the ball was a game, right? A bet. Isabella looked at him and smiled slightly. Yeah, I know, but don't worry, I'm not your piece for the game. I'm here for myself. That's what matters, don't you think? Leon was surprised by her confidence. He had never seen her like this. Isabella's vulnerability was what made her so strong. The night was turning out to be more than just a bet for him. It was a chance to see the company and his employees in a completely new light, and he felt that his view of the world was beginning to shift. As the night wore on, Isabella found herself drawn into more conversations, more moments of connection than she could ever have imagined. While she had never been the life of the party, the conversations she had with the guests began to flow. Naturally, she wasn't trying to impress anyone, not even Leon. Instead, she was simply being herself. And somehow, that was enough. Leon watched from a distance as Isabella interacted with others. There was something magnetic about her, something that pulled people in without her having to try. She wasn't playing the game that everyone else seemed to be playing. She wasn't pretending to be someone she wasn't. She was just there, fully present, and that was what made her stand out. And in that moment, Leon began to realize something that had eluded him for years. The most powerful people weren't those who tried the hardest to be seen, but those who quietly commanded attention by simply being authentic. He felt a tug inside him, a curiosity that hadn't been there before. He couldn't take his eyes off Isabella. She was changing before him, but so was he. There was a shift happening, one that neither of them could control. Later in the evening, as the event began to wind down, Leon finally approached her, feeling an unexpected sense of urgency. He had never been one to chase after anything, especially not someone like Isabella, who was so far from his usual type. But there was something undeniable about the pull she had on him. Isabella, he said, his voice softer than usual, I have to admit, I didn't expect this. I didn't expect you to be, well, so different. Isabella, who had been talking to a group of colleagues, looked up at him, her expression calm but curious. Different? In what way? She asked, tilting her head slightly. She could feel the shift in the air between them, the change that had come over the night. It wasn't just the ball or the excitement of the event. Something had happened between them, something more profound. Leon hesitated for a moment, choosing his words carefully. I've always been surrounded by people who play the game. You know, the ones who are always trying to be seen, always trying to prove their worth, but you don't play that game. You just are, and that's refreshing. Isabella felt a small spark of pride at his words, though she quickly masked it with a smile. I didn't come here to impress anyone, she said simply. I'm not here to be anything other than who I am. There was a long pause between them, as if the weight of the words they shared lingered in the air. Leon was starting to understand something about himself, something he hadn't known he was missing. The people he surrounded himself with, the business deals he made, they had all been about success and power. But now, standing there with Isabella, he realized that there was something much more meaningful than that. Authenticity, vulnerability, and connection. I'm glad you came tonight, Leon said quietly, his tone different from the casual confidence he usually exuded. I think you've shown me something I didn't even know I needed to see. Isabella smiled, the weight of his words sinking in. She had never expected the night to turn into anything more than a simple event for the company. But in that moment, with Leon standing before her, she realized that she had allowed herself to be seen in a way she never had before. And, perhaps, for the first time, she didn't mind it. I didn't think this night would be anything special either, Isabella said softly, her eyes meeting his. But I think it's turned out to be something different, something unexpected. Leon stepped a little closer, his eyes locked with hers, searching for an unspoken answer. And what does that mean for us? For a moment, Isabella didn't know what to say. She had come to this event with no expectations, just a simple desire to step out of the shadows and be seen. But now, as she looked at Leon, she realized that the connection they shared was something neither of them had anticipated. It wasn't just about the night or the ball anymore. It was about something deeper. I think it means, she began, her voice steady, that maybe we're both more than what we've allowed ourselves to be so far. Leon smiled, his gaze softening. I think you're right, the knight continued. But for Leon and Isabella, everything had changed. They both knew that this moment would mark the beginning of something new, a shift in their dynamic, their understanding of each other, and, ultimately, their understanding of themselves. Asterisk, as the night came to a close, and the last guests began to trickle out of the event. Isabella and Leon found themselves standing by the balcony, overlooking the city lights below. The initial excitement of the ball had faded, but something deeper lingered in the air between them, a connection that neither of them could explain, but one they both felt undeniably. Leon, usually a man of control, had let his guard down in a way he never thought possible. He had spent years building his empire, making connections, and navigating the corporate world with the same precision he applied to his strategies. But now, with Isabella standing beside him, he realized that all his achievements had somehow missed something important: real, human connection. Isabella, on the other hand, felt different than she ever had before. She had always hidden behind her work, keeping her head down, allowing her accomplishments to speak for themselves. But tonight, she had stepped out of the shadows. She had been seen, and not just by Leon, but by herself. For the first time in a long while, she felt alive in a way she couldn't quite define. So, Leon began, his voice calm but laced with curiosity. Tell me something, Isabella. Why have you hidden all these years? You're brilliant, you have so much to offer, but you choose to remain invisible. The question caught her off guard. She hadn't expected to be asked something so personal, so direct. She hesitated, unsure of how to explain the layers of doubt and fear that had kept her hidden for so long. It's not that I chose to be invisible, she said softly, looking out at the city lights. It's just easier that way. People, they expect things from you. They expect you to be someone you're not, and I didn't want that. I wanted to work without anyone expecting me to perform, to shine, to be anything other than what I am. Leon nodded slowly, absorbing her words. He understood the fear of being seen, the pressure to conform to others' expectations, but there was something about Isabella that made him believe that hiding behind the shadows was never truly her choice. It was a defense mechanism, built over time, but now he could see that it had stifled her potential. I understand, he said quietly, but I think you've always been more than what you've allowed others to see, and honestly, more than I've seen. Isabella turned to face him, meeting his eyes for the first time that night. There was no pretense in his gaze, no expectation, just a raw honesty that she hadn't expected from someone like him. I didn't expect to hear that from you, she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. Leon smiled slightly, stepping a little closer. I'm not sure what it is about you, Isabella, but something about tonight. It's made me see things differently. I've spent my entire life building walls around myself, around my business, thinking I needed to keep everything in control. But when I look at you, I realize that maybe there's more to life than control. Her heart beat a little faster at his words. For the first time, she saw Leon not as the CEO of the company she worked for, but as a man who I was capable of vulnerability, of recognizing the importance of human connection. A man who wasn't afraid to be honest, even if it meant challenging his own beliefs. I've never really let myself be seen either, she confessed, her eyes never leaving his. Not in the way you're asking. But tonight, I feel different. Like maybe, just maybe, I can stop hiding. Leon reached out, gently brushing a strand of hair from her face. It was a simple gesture, but it felt significant. It was the first time either of them had allowed themselves to be truly vulnerable in each other's presence. You don't have to hide anymore, Isabella, Leon said, his voice softer now, and you're not invisible. Not to me. The words hung in the air, heavy with unspoken meaning. Isabella felt her heart flutter, unsure of what exactly was happening between them, but knowing that something was shifting. It wasn't just about the ball anymore, or the bet. It was about something real, something that transcended the professional boundaries they had built between them. For the first time that night, Isabella smiled, a genuine, heartfelt smile. I'm glad I came tonight, she said, her voice filled with gratitude, not just because of the work or the event, but because I finally let myself be who I am. Leon returned her smile, his gaze steady and warm. And I'm glad you came too, because what I see now, Isabella, is someone who deserves to be seen. The night continued to unfold, and the once bustling ballroom now felt quieter, almost as if time itself had slowed down for just the two of them. Isabella and Leon were no longer just a CEO and his employee. They had crossed an invisible line, and neither knew where this new path would lead. But for the first time, Isabella felt something she hadn't felt in years, a sense of belonging, as the music played in the background. Leon led her to a quieter corner of the ballroom, away from the crowd. There, in the dim light, they both stood in silence for a moment, processing the words that had been spoken between them. I've spent my entire career building things, buildings, companies, networks, but never did I realize that the most important things were right in front of me, Leon said, his voice low and contemplative. Isabella turned to face him, her heart beating faster as she felt the weight of his words. And what is that, Leon? She asked softly, her voice trembling just a bit. Leon met her gaze. his expression more vulnerable than she had ever seen before. People. Real connections. The kind you can't control, the kind that change you. I've been so focused on control and success that I forgot what it means to truly see someone, to let them in, to let them be themselves. Isabella felt a wave of emotion wash over her. She had always believed that people like Leon, successful, powerful, were untouchable, too focused on their goals to care about anything else. But now, seeing him like this, so open, so human, made her realize just how wrong she had been. She wasn't invisible to him. He saw her, really saw her, and in that moment, she knew it was more than just about the work. It was about something much deeper, something unspoken between them. I've never really allowed myself to see anyone either, Isabella confessed, her voice quiet but steady. I've hidden behind my work, behind the idea that if I stay out of the spotlight, I won't get hurt. But tonight, it's different. I'm letting myself see you. Leon took a step closer, his presence overwhelming yet comforting. And that's what I admire about you, Isabella. You've always been here, doing the work, but never asking for anything in return. And tonight, you've shown me a side of you I never even knew existed. A side of you that deserves to be recognized, not just by me, but by the world. Isabella's chest tightened at his words. She wasn't used to being praised, especially not for being herself. She had always thought she needed to change, to fit into some mold, to be successful. But Leon had made her realize that she was enough, just as she was. You're not just the invisible employee anymore, Leon added softly, his eyes locked on hers. You're someone who matters, and you deserve more than to be hidden in the shadows. She felt a lump form in her throat, but she smiled through it, looking up at him. And what do we do now, Leon? Where do we go from here? Leon reached out and gently took her hand, his grip warm and reassuring. I don't know where this is going, Isabella, but I do know one thing. I want to explore it. I want to understand who you are, beyond the walls of this company. And I want to share that with you, to see where this connection leads us. For the first time that evening, Isabella allowed herself to imagine a different kind of future. It wasn't about the bet anymore, or proving something to Leon or herself. It was about the possibility of something real, something meaningful, and she felt ready to explore it. I think I'm ready to see where this goes to, she replied, her voice steady and full of quiet determination. Let's find out together. Leon smiled, a genuine smile that reached his eyes. He had never expected the night to take such a turn, but now, standing here with Isabella, he knew it was the beginning of something much bigger than a simple game. This was real. This was them. And for the first time in a long time, Leon felt a sense of excitement, not about his company or his career, but about the unknown journey that lay ahead with Isabella. The following days, after the ball, felt different, for both Leon and Isabella. There was a shift in the air, an unspoken change between them. Work continued as usual at Quantum Shift, but there was a new dynamic that neither could deny. Their interactions, once professional and distant, now carried an undercurrent of something much more personal, much more intimate. For Isabella, the night had marked a turning point. She had walked into that ballroom feeling like a stranger in a world that wasn't hers. But by the end of the evening, she realized that she wasn't invisible anymore. Leon Hastings, the powerful CEO, had seen her, not just as an employee, but as a person, and that simple acknowledgement had cracked open something within her that she had kept locked away for years. That is for Leon. He couldn't stop thinking about Isabella, the way she had stood out without trying to be seen, the way she had connected with people, and with him, in a way that no one else had ever done. He had always been surrounded by people who were trying to climb, to compete, to prove their worth. But with Isabella, it was different. She wasn't trying to prove anything. She simply was. And that made all the difference. A few days after the ball, Leon found himself walking into Isabella's office. The door was slightly open, as always, and he knocked lightly before stepping inside. She was at her desk, the glow of the computer screen illuminating her face, her focus on the code she was working on. Isabella, Leon said, his voice soft but firm. We need to talk. Isabella looked up, surprised to see him there. He hadn't come by her office much before, but now, she could sense something was different about him. Something had shifted since the ball, something unspoken between them. Of course, Leon, she replied, a little hesitant. She wasn't sure what this conversation would lead to, but she knew it would be more than just about work. What's on your mind? He leaned against her desk, his eyes meeting hers with a calm intensity. I've been thinking a lot about the other night, about what you said, about how you've been hiding, and I think it's time for us to stop pretending. Both of us? Isabella felt a flicker of unease, but also something else, a spark of curiosity. Stop pretending, she repeated, trying to keep her voice steady. What do you mean? Leon began, taking a deep breath. We've both been hiding, in our own ways. You've been hiding behind your work, and I've been hiding behind the company, behind my position, but we both know that there's more to us than that, more than just our roles. And I think it's time we figure out what that means. Isabella sat back in her chair, her heart racing. This was not the conversation she had expected, and certainly not in the way she had imagined. But there was something in Leon's tone, something vulnerable that made her want to listen, to understand where he was coming from. I've spent my life building an empire, Leon continued, his voice quieter now. But all the money, the power, the influence, none of it really matters if you don't have people who see you for who you really are. And Isabella, you've shown me something that I never expected. You've shown me what it means to just be. Isabella's eyes softened. She hadn't realized how deeply this was affecting him. I didn't mean to change anything, she said gently. I just wanted to be seen, for once, without all the masks we wear. But you're right. I've been hiding, and so have you. Leon nodded, his gaze steady. I think we both have a lot to learn from each other, but we can't keep pretending that this is just about business anymore. Not for me, and not for you. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The weight of their words hung between them, the realization that something had begun to shift. This wasn't just about work or appearances anymore. It was about honesty, vulnerability, and the possibility of something deeper, something real. Isabella finally spoke, her voice more certain now. What are we supposed to do with all this, Leon? We've both crossed a line, haven't we? A line that we can't just go back from. Leon smiled, a rare, genuine smile that reached his eyes. I think it's time we let ourselves be seen for who we truly are. No more pretending, just us, figuring this out together. Isabella felt a rush of emotions. She wasn't sure where this would lead, but for the first time in a long time, she was ready to stop hiding. Ready to see where this new connection would take them. As the silence settled, Leon reached out and gently placed his hand on hers. The simple gesture sent a jolt of warmth through her, a connection that went beyond words. We'll figure it out, he said softly, his voice steady and confident. Together, and for the first time, Isabella believed him. Days passed, and the atmosphere at Quantum Shift shifted as well. What began as a subtle change between Leon and Isabella was now undeniable. The once clear boundaries of their professional roles were no longer as defined, and they found themselves sharing more than just work-related conversations. They began to meet outside of office hours, not to discuss projects or business, but to learn more about each other, to unravel the layers they had both kept hidden for so long. Isabella had never felt this free, no longer confined to the shadows of her own making. She allowed herself to explore parts of herself that had been dormant for years. She was still the brilliant, dedicated engineer, but now, she was also someone who wasn't afraid to step into the light, even if it meant being vulnerable. And Leon, too, was feeling the weight of this newfound vulnerability. As a CEO, he had spent his entire career building walls around his life, focusing solely on his company, his vision for the future. But with Isabella, those walls were coming down. He found himself thinking about her constantly, not just as a colleague or employee, but as someone who was changing his perspective on what really mattered. One afternoon, a few weeks after the ball, Leon invited Isabella to a small cafe near the company's headquarters. It was a quiet spot, away from the hustle and bustle of their professional lives. He had planned this meeting not to talk business, but to ask her something he had been thinking about for days. Isabella, he began as they sat down, the coffee cups between them steaming softly. I've been thinking a lot about where we're heading, about what we're becoming. And I want to be clear about something. I don't want this, whatever it is, to be just a passing moment, a brief connection. I want us to explore this fully, together. Isabella looked at him, her heart beating a little faster. She had been wondering the same thing. There had been moments over the past few weeks where she had caught herself imagining a future that wasn't just about being a part of Quantum Shift, but about being part of something else, something personal, something real. She knew what he was asking, and it both excited and scared her. The possibility of taking their connection beyond the office, beyond the professional roles they had both lived for so long, was a leap she wasn't sure she was ready to make. But there was something about Leon that made her want to take that leap, to step into the unknown with him. I think, Isabella hesitated for a moment, choosing her words carefully. I think we've both been holding back for so long. I've been hiding behind my work, and you've been hiding behind your company. But now I see something different. I see a possibility, Leon, possibility that I'm not sure we should ignore. Leon nodded, his gaze steady and serious. I don't want to ignore it either, but I don't want to rush things. I think we need to take our time, not just to figure out where this is going, but to really understand what we're building. Together, for the first time in a long while, Isabella felt a sense of clarity. She was no longer worried about what people might think, or whether this was a bad decision. She was learning to trust herself, to trust her instincts, and her instincts were telling her that Leon was someone worth taking a chance on. I agree, she said softly, her voice steady. Let's take it slow. Let's figure this out, step by step. But I'm ready. I'm ready for what comes next. Leon's expression softened as he reached across the table, taking her hand in his. The simple gesture felt like an unspoken promise. It wasn't just about their professional lives anymore. It was about building something new, a partnership, a connection, a future. We'll do this at our own pace, he said, his voice warm. No rush, just us, figuring it out. As Isabella looked at him, something inside her shifted. She was ready for whatever came next. She was no longer the invisible employee, Hiding in the background, she was Isabella Carter, and she was ready to step into the light with Leon by her side. Asterisk as days passed into weeks. Leon and Isabella began to embrace their new dynamic, taking their time to build something real, something genuine. They didn't rush into anything, but the connection between them was undeniable. What started as a professional relationship had evolved into something deeper, something neither of them had expected but both welcomed with open arms. Their interactions were no longer limited to business meetings or casual exchanges. They spent time outside the office, talking about life, their dreams, their struggles. They shared their vulnerabilities, their fears, and slowly, they began to trust each other in ways they had never trusted anyone before. Isabella had always kept a wall up, but Leon made her feel safe enough to let it down, piece by piece. And Leon, for the first time, found himself opening up to someone in a way that wasn't dictated by his role as CEO, but as a man. One afternoon, as they sat together in a small park near the office, Leon looked at Isabella with an expression that had become familiar to her, one of quiet contemplation, as though he was piecing together his thoughts. "Isabella," he said softly, his voice sincere, "I never imagined that the person I'd be most open with, the one who'd make me rethink everything, would be someone like you." Isabella smiled, though there was a hint of nervousness in her eyes. "Someone like me?" she repeated. Not entirely sure what he meant, Leon chuckled softly, his eyes warm. "I don't mean that in a bad way," he said quickly. "I mean, I've always been surrounded by people who want something from me, who see me only as the CEO, the leader, but you've never treated me like that. You see me, really see me, not just for what I do, but for who I am." Isabella felt a flutter in her chest at his words. For so long, she had been invisible, hiding in plain sight, focusing only on her work and nothing else. But now, with Leon, she was finally being seen in a way that felt real, not for her title, not for her job performance, but for who she truly was, a person with feelings, with dreams, with a life outside of work. "You've seen me too, Leon," she said softly, her voice steady but filled with emotion. "I've never had someone really see me like this, not like you do, not in the way that makes me feel, I don't know, like I matter, just as I am." Leon's gaze softened, and he reached out to gently touch her hand. "You matter more than you know, Isabella, to me, and to this company. You're not invisible, and you never were." Those words hit her deeper than she had expected. Isabella had spent so much of her life blending into the background, focusing only on her work and keeping her emotions hidden. But now, with Leon by her side, she realized that she had more to offer than she had ever allowed herself to believe. She was no longer just a part of the company. She was someone who mattered, who had a voice, and who had the right to be seen and heard. For the first time, Isabella felt truly free. She wasn't just Leon's employee anymore. She wasn't just the quiet woman behind the scenes. She was someone who could take up space, someone who could be herself without fear of judgment or rejection. "I never thought I'd be here," she said softly, her voice almost a whisper. "With you, in this place, in this new space that we're creating." Leon smiled, his hand still holding hers. "Neither did I," he admitted, "but I'm glad we are." They sat in silence for a moment, the sound of the wind rustling the leaves around them, and the world seeming to fade into the background. In that moment, Leon and Isabella both understood that they had crossed a threshold, one that had taken them from colleagues to something much more, and though neither of them knew exactly where it would lead, they both knew they were ready to take that next step. Isabella looked up at him, her heart full. "So what now? What comes next for us?" Leon squeezed her hand gently. "What comes next is up to us. But whatever it is, we face it together, and I'm not going anywhere." Isabella smiled, her eyes meeting his with the kind of trust and understanding she had never known before. She knew that this was just the beginning, and no matter what came next, she was ready to face it with him. After that afternoon in the park, Leon and Isabella knew that things had changed, and there was no going back. The connection they shared had deepened in a way neither of them had anticipated. What had started as a business relationship, followed by a simple invitation to a ball, had turned into something that felt real, something neither of them could ignore despite their growing feelings. They both understood that the path ahead wasn't going to be easy. The barriers of their professional lives, the expectations placed on them by their roles at Quantum Shift, and the fact that they came from different worlds, all of it would be difficult to navigate. But there was one thing that was now undeniable. They were in this together, and they were ready to face whatever came next. Days turned into weeks, and their relationship grew stronger. They continued to meet outside of work, sharing quiet dinners and long conversations. Leon began to open up about his past, the sacrifices he had made to build his company, the loneliness that came with power, and his fear of losing control. Isabella shared her own fears, about her place in the world, about whether she could ever truly belong in a place like Quantum Shift, and about how long she had hidden behind her work to avoid facing who she really was. One evening, as they sat together on a rooftop overlooking the city, Leon turned to Isabella with a thoughtful expression. "You know, I've spent so much of my life thinking I had it all figured out. I built a company, created wealth, and I thought that would make me happy. But the truth is, none of that means anything if you don't have someone to share it with. Someone who sees you for who you are. Someone who doesn't just see the CEO, but the person underneath. Isabella's heart ached as she looked at him. She had never imagined Leon Hastings, the powerful CEO of Quantum Shift, would be so vulnerable, so open. But it was in these moments, in his honesty, in the quiet ways he showed his true self, that she saw him for who he truly was. Not just a man of power, but someone who longed for connection, for meaning beyond the business. I understand, she said softly, squeezing his hand. I spent so many years hiding, thinking that if I just kept my head down and did my job, I could avoid the things that scared me. But being with you, talking to you like this, it feels different. It feels like I'm not hiding anymore. And for the first time in a long time, I feel like I'm not alone. Leon smiled, his eyes softening as he looked at her. You're not alone, Isabella. Not anymore. And you never will be. They sat in silence for a while, the soft hum of the city below them, the wind carrying a sense of calm. The connection between them was undeniable, and yet, they both knew that stepping into the unknown wasn't going to be easy. They would have to face challenges, confront their own insecurities, and navigate the complexities of their professional lives. But as long as they had each other, they knew they could handle anything. I've always been afraid of taking risks, Leon said after a while, breaking the silence. Of letting go of control. But with you, I feel like maybe it's time to stop playing it safe. Maybe it's time to take a chance on something real. Isabella looked at him, her eyes filled with understanding. I've spent so much of my life thinking I had to stay in my comfort zone, thinking I could just hide and everything would be fine. But now I'm ready to take that leap, too. To let myself be seen. To be with you. Leon's gaze softened, and without thinking, he leaned in and kissed her gently. The kiss was soft, tentative, but it spoke volumes. It was the beginning of something they both had longed for, even if they hadn't fully realized it until now. When they pulled away, Isabella smiled, her heart full. So, what now? She asked, her voice filled with hope and curiosity. Leon looked at her, a genuine smile spreading across his face. Now, we see where this takes us. Together, and for the first time in their lives, both of them felt ready to face whatever came next, knowing that they would do it side by side. As weeks passed, Leon and Isabella's bond deepened, transforming into something undeniable and profound. They had stepped beyond the boundaries of their professional lives, and although their connection was still in its early stages, it felt like the most real thing either of them had ever experienced. Their time together, the quiet moments, and the intense conversations, had allowed them to open up in ways neither had thought possible. But as their relationship grew, so did the challenges. Isabella knew that despite their personal connection, they still had to navigate the world of Quantum Shift, where Leon was the powerful CEO and she, the once invisible employee. The dynamics of the workplace couldn't simply be ignored. The expectations of their colleagues, the risks involved in their personal lives crossing over into their professional roles. These were all things that weighed on her mind. Leon, too, understood the complexities of their situation. He had built an empire from the ground up. But the closer he got to Isabella, the more he realized how much of his life had been dominated by his career and his need for control. And now, with Isabella by his side, he couldn't help but wonder how they could both have the relationship they wanted while still maintaining their professional responsibilities. One evening, after another long day at work, Leon and Isabella met at a small, quiet park not far from the office. It was one of the few places where they could find peace, away from the hustle and bustle of their professional lives. They sat on a bench together, the cool evening breeze gently rustling the leaves of the trees above them. The park was nearly empty, with only a few people walking in the distance. The city, for once, seemed to fade away. I've been thinking, Leon said, his voice a little uncertain, about how we move forward from here, about us, about everything. Isabella turned to face him, sensing the weight in his words. She reached out, placing her hand gently on his. What are you thinking? He took a deep breath, his eyes meeting hers with a quiet intensity. I know that what we're doing, it's not easy. The world we live in, the roles we play, they make things more complicated than they need to be. And I don't want to hide this anymore. I don't want to keep pretending that I'm just the CEO and you're just my employee. We're more than that. You're more than that. Isabella's heart fluttered at his words. She had spent so many years hiding, afraid of the risks that came with being seen, of being vulnerable. But here, in this moment, with Leon, she didn't want to hide anymore. She didn't want to be invisible. Not to him, not to anyone. I've been thinking the same thing, she said softly. I know we've had to keep our relationship a secret for now, but I don't want to hide anymore. I don't want to be afraid of what might happen. I want to be with you, Leon, without all the walls. I don't want to live in fear anymore. Leon squeezed her hand gently, the connection between them growing stronger with each word spoken. Then let's stop hiding. Let's be who we are, not just in private, but in the world. I don't care about the risks anymore. I care about us. And I want to build something with you, something real. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The weight of their words hung in the air, but neither of them felt the need to fill the silence. They both understood what this meant. It meant taking a step into the unknown, embracing a future that wasn't guaranteed, but one they were both willing to face together. "I'm ready," Isabella said, her voice steady and filled with a quiet strength. "I'm ready for whatever comes next. With you." Leon smiled, the relief in his expression evident. He had never been more certain of anything in his life. "Then let's do this. Let's take this journey together, without fear, without hesitation." The night stretched on, and they sat together in the park, talking about the future and everything. It held they knew the challenges wouldn't be easy, that they would face difficulties along the way. But for the first time, they were no longer afraid of the unknown. Together, they would navigate it, side by side. As they stood up to leave, Leon pulled Isabella into a tight embrace, holding her as if he never wanted to let go. "Whatever happens, we'll face it together," he whispered, his voice filled with conviction. Isabella smiled, her heart full. Together. And with that, they walked into the future not as a CEO and his employee, not as two people afraid of what might come next, but as two people who had found something real, something worth fighting for. Together. The following weeks brought their own set of challenges. As Leon and Isabella stepped out of the shadows and began to embrace their relationship openly, they quickly realized just how complicated things could become. Quantum Shift was a large company, and the professional world they had both inhabited for so long was full of complexities, office politics, expectations, and the ever-present pressure of performance. Now, not only were they navigating their personal connection, but they were also balancing the delicate act of maintaining professionalism. At first, their colleagues seemed to notice the change. There were subtle glances, whispers, and questions that hovered just beneath the surface. But neither Leon nor Isabella allowed themselves to be intimidated. They knew they had to face the world head-on, not as CEO and employee, but as partners, ready to create something stronger and more meaningful than the roles they had once been confined to. The pressure was not lost on Leon. As CEO, his life had always been under scrutiny, and now that scrutiny was turning towards his relationship with Isabella. Some admired their openness, while others were skeptical, unsure of what this new dynamic meant for the company. But Leon refused to let anyone's judgment define what they had. He knew that the risks were great. If their relationship became public, there would be challenges. The company might question their professionalism, and some might try to undermine them, seeing it as a weakness rather than a strength. But in his heart, he knew that this connection with Isabella wasn't something he was willing to give up. It wasn't just a personal relationship, it was a partnership built on mutual respect and shared values, something that could benefit not just them, but the company as well. One afternoon, they decided to take a break from the constant pressure of work and went for a walk in a quiet part of the city. The day was crisp, the air fresh, and they needed the moment of calm away from the prying eyes of the office. As they walked side by side, Leon turned to Isabella, his expression serious but filled with resolve. "We can't hide anymore, Isabella," he said softly, his voice steady but filled with determination. "The company is starting to ask questions, and I don't want to keep pretending. If we're going to be together, we need to be honest, not just with each other, but with the people around us." Isabella nodded, her heart in her throat. She had known this conversation was coming. She had felt the weight of it, the pressure of the outside world watching them, but she was ready. She was ready to face the challenges, no matter how difficult they might be. "I agree," she said, looking up at him. "But we need to be prepared for what might come. There will be people who won't understand, and there will be people who will try to make this harder than it has to be." Leon stopped walking, turning to face her fully. "I'm not afraid of the challenges, Isabella. I've faced challenges my whole life, but I need to know that you're with me on this, that we're in this together, no matter what." Isabella smiled, her heart swelling with affection and pride. "I am with you, Leon, and I always will be. We've built something real, something worth fighting for. Whatever happens, we'll face it together." The intensity of the moment settled between them, and for the first time, both of them felt completely aligned in their intentions. The road ahead wouldn't be easy, but they were ready to face it, side by side. And so, they decided to take the next step. Leon called an all-hands meeting with the executive team. It was time to come clean. Time to share the truth about their relationship and let the company know they were no longer hiding. They were ready to be transparent, to show the world that they were united not just in business, but in life. The following day, in the sleek conference room that overlooked the city, Leon stood in front of the leadership team, with Isabella by his side. His voice was calm, but there was a quiet strength in his words. "I want to address something important," Leon began, his gaze moving across the room. "Isabella and I have been working together at Quantum Shift for a long time. Recently, our relationship has grown into something more than just a professional connection. We want to be clear with all of you, and we want to be open about this." There was a moment of silence, as the room absorbed his words. Then, slowly, one of the executives spoke up. "I have to say, I admire your honesty," said Karen, the chief operations officer. "But what does this mean for the company, for the way we do business?" Leon smiled, his response sure and firm. It means that we are committed to maintaining the integrity and success of Quantum Shift. This doesn't change anything about the way we work. It only strengthens the bond between us, which in turn will make this company stronger. We're here because we believe in this company, and we believe in each other, Isabella added, her voice steady. We are committed to this company and to its mission. Our relationship will not interfere with the work we do here. We will continue to lead with integrity, professionalism, and respect for each other and for all of you. As the meeting ended, there was an air of cautious optimism. Some of the team members were still processing the news, but there was a sense of understanding in the room. Leon and Isabella had taken the bold step of being honest with their colleagues, and it was clear that this was the beginning of a new chapter, not just for their relationship, but for Quantum Shift as a whole. After the meeting, as they walked out of the conference room, Leon turned to Isabella with a proud smile. We did it. Now we can focus on what really matters, the work, the future, and each other. Isabella smiled back, her heart full. Yes, together. In the days following their open meeting with the executive team, the atmosphere at Quantum Shift shifted. Once again, there were whispers, of course. And no matter how well they managed the transition, the world outside their relationship had its own opinions. But inside, Leon and Isabella remained firm, grounded in the strength of their bond. They knew they had done the right thing by being open and honest, and that was enough for them. Isabella, once the quiet, reserved engineer, now found herself in a new role. It wasn't that her professional skill had changed overnight, but she began to see herself differently. She wasn't just the invisible employee anymore. She was seen, valued, and respected by those around her. Even the leadership team, who had initially been skeptical, came to realize the depth of Leon and Isabella's commitment to Quantum Shift and to each other. As for Leon, he felt a sense of relief. He had spent years maintaining a carefully constructed image, both as CEO and as a leader, but being open with the company had allowed him to shed some of that weight. The pressure to maintain control had always been a constant, but now, with Isabella by his side, he felt more like his true self than ever before. He wasn't just the leader of the company. He was a man who was ready to let go of the fears that had held him back for so long. One evening, after another long day of work, Leon and Isabella sat together at a small cafe, away from the office. They were still navigating the complexities of their situation, but there was a quiet comfort in knowing they were facing it together. I've been thinking about everything, Leon said, his voice soft, about the risks we've taken, about how much we've changed. Isabella smiled gently, her eyes meeting his. We've come a long way, she replied, and we're still figuring it out. But I wouldn't want to be doing this with anyone else. Leon reached across the table, taking her hand in his. I don't want to be with anyone else either, Isabella. I'm proud of what we've built, both professionally and personally, and I know it's not always going to be easy, but we're in this together. Isabella nodded, feeling the warmth of his words settle in her chest. Together, she repeated, her voice steady with conviction. They sat in comfortable silence for a few moments, simply enjoying each other's company. There was no need for words. Their connection spoke volumes. On its own, it wasn't just about their relationship anymore. It was about how they had changed, how they had become something more, not just for each other, but for themselves. As the evening wore on, they left the cafe and walked through the quiet streets of the city, hand in hand. Leon and Isabella didn't know what the future would hold, but they were no longer afraid of it. They had faced the unknown together, and in doing so, had found strength in each other that neither had expected. Do you think it will always be like this? Isabella asked as they walked under the soft glow of the streetlights, her tone playful, but with a hint of sincerity. Leon chuckled softly. I'm not sure, but I know that whatever happens, we'll face it together. The future is unpredictable, but we've got each other. And with that, they both knew that whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them hand in hand, not as the CEO and his employee, but as two people who had found something real, something worth fighting for. As Leon and Isabella navigated the complexities of their personal and professional lives, they began to realize that their relationship had become something more than just a private connection. It had begun to influence the way they approached their work, the way they saw the company, and the way they viewed their future. The truth was, they had both changed in ways they never expected, not just because of each other, but because of the realization that they didn't have to hide anymore. The dynamic between them was still evolving. They had learned how to balance the personal with the professional, how to maintain their connection while continuing to lead Quantum Shift forward. It wasn't always easy, but they made it work, and slowly, the company began to notice the shift. Under Leon's leadership, the company grew stronger, not just in terms of profits, but in terms of its core values. Isabella's influence was felt more than ever. Her vision for the future of the company and the human-centered approach she brought to every project began to shape the company's culture. It wasn't just about technology anymore. It was about making a difference, about connecting with people, about creating real value beyond the bottom line. One evening, as they sat in the conference room, reviewing the company's latest project, Leon looked at Isabella with a new sense of pride. He had always admired her brilliance, but now, seeing how far she had come, how much she had grown. He was truly in awe of the woman she had become. "We've come a long way," he said softly, his voice full of admiration. "I never imagined when we started this journey that we'd be here, that we'd be able to build something this meaningful, not just for us, but for the company and for everyone who's a part of it." Isabella smiled, her eyes shining with the same pride. "It's amazing what happens when you stop hiding, when you let yourself be seen for who you are. We've built something real, Leon, something that matters." They sat in silence for a moment, the weight of the journey they had taken together settling over them. It had been a long road, but they had reached a place where they were no longer afraid of the future. They had faced their fears, their insecurities, and come out stronger on the other side. As Leon stood up, walking over to the large window that overlooked the city, he felt a sense of peace he hadn't known before. He had spent so many years focused on building his empire, on achieving success, but now he realized that true success wasn't just about what you accomplished. It was about who you became along the way. Turning back to Isabella, he smiled. "You know, I used to think that success was all about control, but now I see that it's about trust. Trusting each other, trusting the people around you, and trusting yourself." Isabella walked over to him, standing beside him at the window. She looked out at the city, feeling a sense of fulfillment she had never felt before. "I used to think I wasn't enough, that I had to hide to fit in, but now I know that I am enough. And so are you." Leon turned to her, his eyes filled with gratitude and affection. "I'm glad we found this, Isabella. I'm glad we found each other. And I'm glad we're doing this together." They stood there, side by side, looking out at the city they had both helped build, knowing that whatever came next, they would face it together. The future was uncertain, yes, but for the first time, they didn't fear it. They were ready to embrace whatever came, knowing they had each other. As Leon and Isabella moved forward in both their personal and professional lives, they began to realize just how much their relationship had changed them. The company continued to thrive under Leon's leadership, but it was no longer just about profits and technological breakthroughs. Now, it was about something deeper, the values they shared, the vision they had for the future, and the impact they wanted to have on the world around them. The cultural shift at Quantum Shift had become apparent. Employees began to feel more connected to the company's mission, more aligned with the leadership team, and more empowered to share their ideas and passions. Leon and Isabella led by example, showing the team that success was about more than just achieving numbers. It was about integrity, collaboration, and creating a positive environment where everyone could thrive. One morning, after a particularly inspiring meeting with the leadership team, Leon turned to Isabella, his eyes reflecting a quiet satisfaction. "I don't think I've ever been more proud of this company," he said, his voice calm but filled with emotion. "It's not just about the numbers anymore. It's about the people, the ideas, the culture we've built." Isabella smiled, her heart swelling with pride. She had spent years hiding in the shadows, unsure of her place in the world. But now, here she was, not just a partner to Leon, but a leader in her own right. "It's amazing what happens when we all believe in something bigger than ourselves," she replied, her voice steady. "And when we stop trying to fit into someone else's idea of what we should be." Leon looked at her, a knowing smile playing on his lips. "We're both learning that, aren't we?" She nodded, her eyes meeting his with a quiet intensity. "We've both come so far, Leon, from that night at the ball to this moment. It feels like a lifetime, but it also feels like the beginning." Leon reached for her hand, his fingers lightly brushing against hers. "I think it is the beginning of something new, something that's not just about the work we do, but the lives we're building together." For a moment, neither of them spoke. They both understood that they had reached a turning point, not just in their relationship, but in their lives. They had come through the challenges, the doubts, the fears, and had emerged stronger. But more than anything, they had found each other, and in doing so, they had found themselves. Later that evening, as the sun began to set over the city, they walked through the streets, side by side. It wasn't a celebratory walk, but a quiet, reflective one. They both knew that the journey they had started together wasn't over, it had only just begun. "I used to think success was about reaching the top," Leon said, his voice soft as they walked along the sidewalk. "But now I know it's about who you become along the way, and who you get to share that journey with." Isabella squeezed his hand gently. "We've built something real, something that matters," she said, "but the most important part is that we've done it together, and we'll continue to do it together." Leon smiled, stopping for a moment to look at her. "Together," he repeated, his voice full of meaning. "Always." And as they stood there, looking out at the city they had helped shape, both of them knew that their future was no longer uncertain. They had built a foundation, not just for their company, but for their lives, a foundation of trust, love, and shared vision. And no matter what challenges lay ahead, they were ready to face them side by side, side by side. As the months passed, Leon and Isabella became more than just a couple navigating the waters of a professional relationship. They had become a team built on trust, respect, and a shared vision for both quantum shift and their personal lives. They knew the road ahead would still have its challenges, but for the first time, they were ready to face them. Not alone, but together. Their commitment to each other had only grown stronger. They supported each other not just in their professional roles, but in their personal ambitions too. Isabella had flourished as a leader within the company, bringing her innovative ideas to the forefront and shaping the company's direction in ways she had never imagined. Leon, too, had transformed not just in how he led quantum shift, but in how he viewed himself and his relationships with those around him. The walls he had once built to protect himself had come down, and he found himself more connected to the people in his life than ever before. One evening, as they sat in the quiet of their apartment overlooking the city, Leon turned to Isabella. The city lights sparkled below them, but there was something more magical in the air tonight. It wasn't just the view or the success they had achieved. It was the sense that, together, they had created something real, something worth holding. Unto Isabella, Leon began, his voice soft but filled with conviction. We've come so far, not just as a company, but as individuals. I don't think I've ever felt more sure about anything in my life than I do about this, about us. Isabella looked at him, her heart full. I feel the same way, she replied. We've built something that matters, not just in business, but in life. And I couldn't have done it without you, without your support, your belief in me, and in us. He reached out, taking her hand in his. And I couldn't have done it without you either. You've shown me what real connection, real trust, is. I'm not just the CEO of a company anymore. I'm someone who's learning to live fully, to be honest, and to be seen because of you. The words hung in the air between them, a simple acknowledgement of the journey they had been on. But it was more than that. It was a promise to continue facing whatever challenges lay ahead, not just as leaders of a company, but as partners in every sense of the word. I don't know what the future holds, Leon continued, but I do know this. I want to face it with you. I want to keep building, not just the company, but a life that matters. A life where we can both be who we really are, without fear or hesitation. Isabella smiled, her eyes shining with a quiet confidence. We've already built that life, Leon, and we'll keep building it, together. We've faced everything that's come our way, and we'll keep doing that, together. There was no doubt in her voice, no hesitation. She meant every word, and as Leon looked into her eyes, he realized that this, what they had built, was the real achievement. The business, the success, the challenges, those were important, but they didn't hold the same weight as the life they had created. Together, he stood up, pulling her into his arms, holding her tightly as if he never wanted to let go. Together, he whispered, as they stood there, in each other's arms, looking out at the life they had created. Always, she whispered, back, and with that simple word, they knew they had everything they needed, not just as partners in business, but as partners in life.